Here we go. Talking about the tenure and promotion process and the procedure. And I wanted to go over it, and I'm recording it in part because people that actually may need to see some of this information aren't able to attend at the time that I had open. Um, but here's our agenda. And I wasn't sure if the dean was going to stop in, but both of our schedules have been pretty hectic. So I'm going to go over some of the process, some of what's important. This is going to be recorded. I can send you a copy of this so you have the links here so you'll be able to find information. Talk about the responsibilities, how it's done, and address questions. I'm going to try and accomplish all that in an hour. And since it's just us, this should be pretty, I should be able to do it. You know, for 25 people or 100 people, it might be harder. So first of all, the instructions, they're next to impossible to find unless you know where to look. And I don't know how many years I worked here and didn't even know that we had instructions from the Office of the Provost and Academic Affairs, but they are under the heading Instructions, surprisingly enough, on the Office of Provost and Academic Affairs page. And if you click on this link, it will take you, and I may end up having to stop the share, but I can do this briefly. Should take you to the instructions. And when I'm referring to the instructions, this is what I'm talking about. We use OneDrive, but what's going to be really important for you, and part of what I'm going to go over today, is this dossier list of documents and who does what, and help you kind of sort that out. It's not an extensive document, but it's there and it describes it very clearly, but still there'll be some questions. Okay, let me see if I can get this down. So that's when I'm talking about the guidelines and instructions, that's where they're coming from. You can also access our College of Education Faculty Resources webpage. There's a ton of information there. If you're looking for tenure and promotion material, don't contact Amy Wilson or the Dean's office. When Dean Hill Clark came in, I believe they had all this, there was all this information that was stored within the Dean's office. It has since been moved to Human Resources. So if you're not able to find your initial appointment letter, I couldn't find mine, things like that. Any of that information you can access through Sheila Mathis. And I have her email address here and her phone number. So she would be your contact person. Amy will send you a link probably in May saying that your share drive file has been open, and you'll have about 3 months to post your information up in this share drive file. And I'll talk about that because there's some things that are unique to using that. At one point, like when I was going up for my mid-tenure review, everything was still in the 3-ring binders. I had 3-ring binders. I still have those. That was fortunate because I had some of my original documents. Anything that you load, I think, Eli, you might have heard me say this last fall, anything that you load in OneDrive, you will, once it's closed to you, you will never have access to it again. So you will want to create your own separate file so that if you're trying to go, or if you need that access to any of that information, you really need to save it and create a file and share drive for yourself so that you have that, or in some type of external drive somehow, so you don't lose it all, because it's very difficult to find. And I had to go to Sheila Mathis for a range of documents that I could no longer find. Then I was able to find my initial 3-ring binders, and I was saved. So if you contact Amy, she knows how to create the file, but she knows nothing else about accessing information or helping you in the system. And if you have problems with how to use the share drive, feel free to contact me while you're doing that. I'm a 12-month person, so I'm going to be around all the time. I wanted to point that out right away, where you can find the instructions. So it's really a shared responsibility between you as the applicant and the dean's office and the department. And of course, for us as faculty, we share the brunt of the work, really. We have the majority of things to do, but I want to cover each one of these areas. Here are things that you will need to upload, and this is all going to be in that dossier list of required documents from the provost's office. So, but these are things that you need to include. And the reason I have it set up as this 0, 1.2 is because in Share Drive, we have some files that are going to get to the number 10. And so you have to have 2 digits in the front. If you have it just as 1.2, when you get to 10.2, the numbers are going to flip around and they're not going to be in order. From my experience is that if people can't find something and if I'm on the, let's say if I were on either the college committee or the departmental committee, or even from the dean's office, I could get emails asking me where an applicant's materials are. And so I've had to search for them at times because they weren't put in order or they weren't done properly, and everybody's really busy and they'll get really frustrated. Some people will say, if it's not there in this order, I can't find it. How can I do their evaluation? So I want you to, just thinking back in past experiences I've had, especially since I've been working in the dean's office, I've had those kinds of emails or phone calls or questions. And so you want to make it as easy as you possibly can for the reviewers. So these are things that you would need to include: your appointment history form, which you kind of fill out. Now, they'll ask you, like, when did you first get graduate faculty status? Those have historically been kept in the graduate school. Brian Meredith would be the contact for that right now. But other than that, anything like that, you would probably, those kinds of dates, Sheila Mathis would have. If you had like an early tenure memo, so you're going up a little earlier, or you had a stop the clock memo, you're responsible for loading that up. The initial appointment letter that you had when you were first hired. And some of those things are difficult to find, especially if you're moving in offices like I had to, just more difficult. Your annual evaluations, and here it means every annual evaluation. So you're really including all of those, and you can access those through your My Memphis. There'll be a place where you can go through, and I can pull that up if I need to. Your mid-tenure evaluation statement by the department. So the department's actually supposed to provided that to you. Their committee letter. When I say the department, I mean the department's committee letter. And then the mid-tenure evaluation statement by the chair. They're also supposed to provide that to you. If they don't, they're not really giving you, and this is just for your own information, they're not really providing you, they're not following process or procedure. And in the sense, they're not providing you due process, and it gives you a grounds for appeal if you had any question about anything. So it's just something to watch. You need to be able to get that material, and usually people provide it pretty quickly. This section 6 is where you write your brief summary about your teaching responsibility, your summary of teaching, your philosophy. And then you go to these section 6.2. Most of us, and I have an asterisk there, don't have SIRS. That's a real old document at the university. But we will have seat summary sheets, and there's the chart, and different departments have done this in different ways. These are teaching sheets, teaching evaluation sheets. At the provost level, they do have a summary sheet where you can put down all of your history. And normally when I do my annual evaluation as a faculty member, I've had to provide this consolidated summary of all the courses I've taught that year. So you would provide those summary sheets. You don't have to provide every single seat for every single class, but you do have to provide all comments. And that has at times where faculty had really divergent comments. or really unfavorable comments. You can't pick and choose your teaching comments. You just provide them. No one's always satisfied. And so there's always, people know that, so you can just expect that, but you have to include both um, the summary sheet and the comments. If you have any peer evaluations of teaching, and maybe that's an ICL, you know, Christine, Eli, we normally don't. You know, in the CPR department, we wouldn't have a peer evaluation of teaching. You don't have to solicit things either. So if you don't have these things, don't include them in that share drive file. All that Amy Wilson is going to do is give you access in your share drive. You have to enter in like 01.2 appointment history form. You have to add in all of your seat summary sheets, and you have to label them like 06.3 seat summary sheet 2019, 06.3 seat summary sheet 2020, and then 21, things like that. They're just some things that are funky in share drive that make it more difficult to find information. I've got teaching honors and awards there on twice. I apologize.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry. So for example, so you're saying if we don't have peer evaluation of teaching, we would still put it in and say, oh, just skip it completely. We don't
just skip it.
We don't say not applicable. We just don't even put it in. Okay.
You don't have to put it in. If you don't have it, don't put it in. There's enough that you have to already upload. You don't have to try and deal with things that you don't have. Teaching honors and awards. So for, if you had any awards, like I was a Earl Crater Award winner. So that goes under, actually goes under teaching, research, and service, because that's the college-wide equivalent of like the Sparks Award for the whole university. But then I would list that and I would provide that. Or if you have any teaching honors or awards from any professional association, this is where you would provide that. It's a list. You don't have to provide a copy of, you know, the nominations. You just list them. So you'd provide like a Word document list of, here was the award, here's the date, here's the date, here's the award, and you just go down that. If you want to provide the actual copy of something, you can do that in supplemental materials. Summary of research. So 7.1 is your summary of research, scholarship, and creative activity. And then you break it down into internal grants and contracts and external grants and contracts. So like for Christine, you'd be emphasizing more of the summary of research, scholarship, creative activity, and then you list the, you know, the date or the period and the name, the dollar figure. You don't include any copy of information that shows like, here's the award, my grant award notification from the federal government. You don't include any of that. It's just simply a listing. In some ways it's redundant because these things are all on your CV, or should be. And the idea that you have to put them in individually again, it just makes it easier for reviewers to find, and goes back to that date and time where we still were using 3-ring binders. So you would include internal grants and contracts and external grants and contracts. And you're going to see that repeated when we go like through teaching, or other areas I'll show you in a second, so I don't lose track. Peer evaluations of your research. Again, if you've had anybody that has written anything about what you've written, you could include it there again as a list. Or their actual document, I suppose, for that. Honors and awards for research. So if you had a research award from a professional association, you would list those there. And these are things that you have to upload. So I mean, what I tell you, it's not very difficult to do, but it's really time consuming, just really time consuming. Part of the time consuming nature for me, I know in the past, was we were not online when we did this, and then they moved to an online system. And I wasn't aware that the online system wasn't going to be available to me. So I learned that by being told I had to go back and find all the documents. Other things that you have to include is then your service, outreach, advising, mentoring. So these are brief. So they're not meant to be 10 pages long. They're meant to be relatively short. The people that are reading them don't have a lot of time, and they're scanning and looking for information. Here again, you'd list any internal grants or contracts for service, as well as external grants for contracts and service. Oops. Go back. Any peer evaluations of that, and then any honors and award. This 9.0, your university curriculum vitae, that's the really, I don't know, that's the one that you have in your My Memphis account. It's not the one that you send out professionally like you're applying. This is your University of Memphis CV that you're required to do when you do your faculty evaluation. You just download, you take a PDF of that and you upload that PDF. And it should include everything that's on there. 10.1 is you list your supplemental materials. So you would list, like if you have supplemental materials would include all of the manuscripts you've written, book chapters, you can include copies of everything like that. So 10.1, you're just listing it on a Word document again. Here are my manuscripts that I've written in the past, I don't know how many years, however far back you're going. They're going to pay more attention. They're going to look at, especially if you're an associate going for full, they are going to look at your whole totality of what you're doing, but they're going to look at that portion that since you've been at the University of Memphis in particular. If you're an assistant, then they're going to be looking at everything that you've done, but they're also going to be looking really particularly at what happened since your midterm evaluation, your mid-tenure evaluation, not midterm. It's almost midterms, thinking about that. So your mid-tenure evaluation, they're going to see what did the committees write in your letters and what have you done? If they made any suggestions, did you follow the suggestions? And to the extent that you did, then that's going to be rated higher. And if you didn't, that could come back here in this process. So again, 10.1 is simply a list. 10.2 is where you'd include the documents. And here it's, again, tricky because you're going to have, let's say you have a manuscript that you wrote in 2015, but then you might have multiple manuscripts that you wrote in another year. If you put them in a title, if you say 10.2 and you say a certain article title, it's going to go alphabetical. It's going to start with the 10.2, then alphabetically it's going to move those around. So if it's for me, the Journal of Applied Rehabilitation Counseling, it's going to show up in one area. The Rehabilitation Counseling Bulletin is always going to show up later if I do it by just 10.2 in journal title. So you have to consider how it's going to fall into place alphabetically and numerically. So I've done things like 10.2.1, 10.2.2, things like that to make it clear. Most of the, I know the dean would prefer that you don't put it into folders because that requires extra clicks and takes extra time. So she's going to be looking at making it, again, make it as easy for her as possible. And when you're thinking about your annual evaluations, the one thing you should know is that the dean's office really has not a lot of input into annual evaluations. They're actually done at your departmental level for the most part, and the rating comes from your department chair. The dean just gets to indicate whether or not she agrees or disagrees. So there's not a lot of room for that. It's not, I think a lot of people think that a lot of that input for annual evaluations is actually coming from the dean, but it's primarily your department chair. So again, if you don't have any internal grants and contracts for service, outreach or advising, don't list them. Only include things that you actually use. I wanted to talk a little bit about selecting your external reviewers. And here are the three basic things that you want to consider. You want to look at the quality of the reviewer. And by that, I mean, is that reviewer close to your area of research? And again, this is, their extent of their CV. You also look at whether or not they're going to be considered a peer institution. So we're close to being a tier 1 Carnegie, but we're a tier 2. We're one of those aspirant institutions. We're hoping to become tier 1. And it sounds like we're very close. So if you're looking at moving into, from an associate to full, then you'd be looking at these kinds of issues. And university that's at least equivalent, you'd probably not go back to a university that's primarily a teaching university and suggest a reviewer from there, because our role here is this mixed role of teaching and research. And think about which universities might be potentially the most impactful. So, I mean, there are universities that are ranked top in their field, and that place may be a good choice for a faculty member to write that external reviewer. If you're going, depending upon where you are, if you're assistant, then you can go associate and full. If you're associate, then you would go primarily with full, or you'd also go with deans and department chairs or center directors that are equivalent positions. And the reason I'm bringing up external reviewers is because I don't think people realize how important they are and how hard it can be to actually get the letters. I don't know if anybody on the call has been an external reviewer. I have, and they take a lot of time. It's basically very similar to doing the tenure and promotion review for other faculty, but now you're responsible for writing this letter yourself, not with the feedback of other people, and then you're providing it to another institution. And there's no, for the most part, there are very few places, there's no compensation for doing it. It's just a service. It does go to your national ranking if people are asking me to write them, but that's a lot of work. Oops. Try and identify at least 5 to 8 potential reviewers yourself. Ask mentors, if you're networking in professional organizations, always consider including an extra name. Make that selection really carefully. So in rehabilitation counseling, for example, there's a split in the field between faculty that consider themselves as preparing counselors and faculty that consider themselves as preparing specialists in rehabilitation who may also do counseling. It's a really bitter argument in our profession, in my profession, that has gone on for 20 years. It's not gotten any better. People are on opposite ends of that continuum. And if I were to get a letter written by somebody that didn't feel that we were counselors, I am sure that it would not be as favorable, because politically it's aligned in a different way. And I have a link to an article at the end of this PowerPoint that I'll send out to you that talks about what happens if you get one of these types of letters. The other thing I can tell you is that if people are upset with you at times, and they may never tell you while you're there for 3 years, 5 years, but if they are, it might come out during that tenure and promotion discussion. So try and get as many potential reviewers as you can, because for the most part, a lot of people, when they're asked, they just won't do it because it just takes too much time and everybody already has a lot going on. So this is what you do. You provide this to your chair or your department head. So Dan in CREP. Here's the responsibility of the chair. So they look at your external review list. They're required to select at least one of your suggestions. So that's why you want to pick people that are favorable to you. Don't pick people who you feel maybe just kind of ambivalent or not as strong. Pick somebody who you feel is going to advocate for you. Then the chair develops his or her own list of reviewers, or the department. And they start contacting reviewers about May. They're asking for people to do it. People will inevitably, a lot of times they will say yes, but then they fall off during that time. So they may have to go back to other people. I can think of one person where I think we went to 16 people to get answers, because people, they said they would, but they didn't, or they couldn't. And then they said they could, but then they couldn't. Those things make it much more difficult for you. And I'm just talking pretty frankly about what happens. Those letters, for people that have agreed, they will write, and they're going to be uploaded into your electronic dossier. And the department's supposed to have a minimum of 4. And I know the university's looking at that because it's been so much more difficult to get external letters of review, but that is one of the things that they're looking at. There's a form that's filled out, and I don't have a copy here, but it talks about, and it's kind of like a little chart. It gives a paragraph about the reviewer's credentials, a statement about the nature of the relationship between you and the candidate and that external reviewer. That's a form that they fill out. I have seen the form, but I know in my own process, I never was provided that.
Steve, can I ask a quick question about
Yes.
that? I guess I'm just thinking that most of the individuals that I have in my mind that I've started drafting a list of letter writers, I was thinking most of them are all 9-month tenure track. And if we don't send that out until May, a lot of them have, they go on summer sabbaticals. And so I wonder, how much that plays into the attrition factor of getting those letters of support completed when it's put out right before summer break. I don't know.
It does influence it. I have to go shut my Roomba off. I'm sorry. I'll be right back, or it's going to be really loud.
So Christine, are you going up for associate?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, and I'm glad you asked a question, because I had a question as well when Steve's earbuds are back in.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad nothing on my end is turned on over here. Is it the expectation that the external reviewers be faculty at other institutions? I'm just thinking, like, the nature of our work, the people that know me best would not be teaching faculty.
No, I think for you in the research role that you're in, it's going to be different.
Okay.
I think that for a number of people that aren't on the call today, or for Luann or for Eli, it's going to be that mix and could involve teaching faculty. So, but a lot of them, I just served on for the University of Memphis, the Sparks External, Sparks Eminent Faculty Award, and they're all the nominees are rated on just teaching, research, and service, but some are clearly stronger in research, some were more service, some were teaching, and some had a balance of all. So what I think that Luann's point is well taken. That's reasons there's so much attrition. You can ask people also about whether or not they would be willing to be, provided to your chair or your department head as a list. I know I have been asked by other faculty that I know before to be a reviewer, but I wasn't contacted at all by the university, and they got a negative review on some of their information, and they asked why I would do that, and I said, well, I wasn't a reviewer, and I really didn't know what they were talking about. So not everybody that you provide on that list is actually, even if they say they will, email to you, yes, I'll do that. Some people will fall off and they won't get it done in time. And a lot of times I think they have to be done around August, beginning of August. And I'll go through those dates in a minute. So no, you don't have to have teaching faculty, because that's not really what you're doing. So you would want to look at researchers. And that would be the area that you're going up in, where other faculty are going for this combination of factors, really. So here's what they're going to ask your external reviewers. And I wanted to touch on this. They're going to say, it's kind of like, how do you evaluate an eminent faculty member? And I asked for criteria, and they said teaching, research, and service were the criteria. It's that open. And so how do you assess the quality of scholarly or creative activity? So they're going to look at your CV. They're going to look at your personal narratives that you write. And you want to pull out 3 or 4 of your best publications, best works that you've done. If you're writing technical reports, some of those things, so that they have an opportunity to review your work. And they're going to send back to your department chair this detailed single-spaced letter that talks about your published work, your overall research agenda, your stature in the field, your potential for future impact. If you're teaching, they're going to talk about your teaching. They'll talk about service. It just depends upon what niche you are within the university. If you're research faculty or if you're clinical faculty, that might be a whole different area. So that's what they're going to do. Now, their rough deadline date is, if I looked at last year, they had to be uploaded somewhere between August 21st and August 28th. So they're going to start soliciting these things in May, the letters in May, but they're going to have to all be to the chairs and uploaded by that time. So the chair, you won't necessarily see these letters for some period of time. You're not going to see them when they first come in. They're not going to share that. The committee will share that in its letter. So I wanted to touch a little bit on that external reviewer responsibility. It's really important because you can get a negative letter, and it's not because your work is negative, it's just because you might be in a different political position in your field.
So Steve, in regards to that, sorry, I just keep jumping in. I have so many questions, but who provides the like our CV, copies of our publications and personal narratives? Do we have to include those with our list of 5 to 8?
You're going to be, you provide those to your chair. Your chair provides them to the external reviewer once they agree to do that.
Okay.
So it's once they agree to do that. Not they're not going to send everything out to somebody until after they've agreed.
Okay.
But
Fair enough.
you don't have to send it to them. You want to, again, just try and pick people that you think that are going to be favorable, and they should be at least at a tier 2 level university to an aspiring, or a tier 1, because that's where the University of Memphis is. It's in this mix. And a lot of people really have, I think, some difficulty with the idea of what it means to be tier 1. Tier 1 doesn't mean only research. Tier 1 does include teaching, because you have to have students to teach in order to have a research university, unless you're in a center like CREP. You have to have students, and you have to have service, because otherwise none of the work in that university actually gets done, or in the community. So they're looking in a lot of ways at well-rounded people, and you may have a really strong research agenda, or a really strong teaching agenda, or strong service, or you might have a balance of those things. All those things are considered. It's one of the reasons that the university has pushed back on the idea of metrics, like saying that you should have so many publications during this period of time, because somebody could have that many publications, but their teaching could be abysmal. They refuse to participate in any service, but they've met all their publications, and so they could say, I hit my 8 or I hit my 10 and I'm done. That's all I have to do. That's not all what goes into the tenure and promotion decision. And what happens is, in this process, is so the chair gets to your committee. Each department has a committee. In CREP, it might be an ad hoc committee, Christine, because it has been in the past. I can't say for sure, but normally your department has a committee. They have somebody that's heading up that committee. They organize it. People that are above your rank and above are the people that make that decision. So if you're an assistant professor, it's not other assistant professors that are involved in that review. They do their review. They do a letter. They provide it to your chair. The chair does their review. They do a letter, and they also have to sign a form with their vote that they include in this when you're going up for tenure and promotion. All of that gets uploaded. Then it goes to the dean for the dean's review. The dean does her own independent review. Then it goes to the provost. The provost does his own independent review. The provost makes a recommendation to President Rudd. And then it goes forward to our board of trustees in June. So the process is a long process. You're getting all this ready this coming summer. The final decision, you might know what the provost says around January, February. The dean will meet with you somewhere in December, but the final vote by the board of trustees doesn't occur until June. So if you're going up in, September of 2021, the final decision is really June of 2022. So it's a long process. The dean's office has only two things to upload. They get to write this statement from the dean, whether or not they're supporting you for tenure and promotion, or whichever, or both, and the statement from the college or school or committee. And the school or committee, I'm putting that in because some of the university has schools, but for us, it's a statement of the college committee. What did they say? And each committee writes this own letter. So the dean can write her own letter, and that's in her statement. You don't upload this. This is uploaded by the dean's office. The department has to complete this signature page, and that signature page is the same page for the department committee, the department chair, the college committee, and the dean. And all of that, everybody's signing off on the same form. So they're basically downloading it, doing their signatures, recording a vote, then moving it forward from there. It also will include the chair's letter and the department's letter, all of your external review letters that you received, the summary of their credentials, and a copy of the letter that was sent to the external evaluators is supposed to be uploaded as well. That's all the departmental responsibility. When you go to, I'm going to see if this works. Okay, so here's a sample tenure and promotion file. I've just listed them as like 0, 1.1 recommendation signature. It's probably a blank page, or it might be a dummy document. Yeah, oh, they're pretty much a blank page.
Steve, are you able to switch shares so that we can see what?
You
you're all-
can't see that?
No, sir. We're just looking at the same PowerPoint slide. You
Okay,
have to
hold on.
switch share at the top.
Yes, I do.
I've had to get accustomed to doing that also.
I know, I forget.
Ah!
So if I can go back out of this, I'm going to go back here. And you can see how I have it listed, and they're just in order numerically. The list of supplemental materials. And here I would just have, and I don't have all my materials listed in here, but the date, like 2018. And then I would just put them kind of like I'm cutting and pasting from my CV, really. I don't really quite understand the process that they require, but this is what they require. So try and set it up in this format. If you forget to put leading zeros, then it's going to be all jumbled up. And if you don't use the number system, then it's going to go alphabetically, and it's also going to jumble things up, and it's going to take a lot more time. So I would just consider doing that. I'm going to go back out of stop share, go back up.
This seems very parallel to what we did for our third year review. in
do.
regards to like the numbering and uploading each of these documents, not in files, but just as numbers to be looked at. So if we can, would it be something that we could just go in and add to what we have for our third year, add in the last year that we have?
You can if
That-
you saved it as a separate file, but if you did not, it's not going to be there for you. You will never, once you close this off, you don't have access again.
No.
It will be stored somehow, but it won't have access. And it could be stored in the event of an appeal. I'm going to pull up the schedule really quickly. Stop share, hold on. I'm getting better now, but here's the schedule that we had last year. And can you see that one?
Yes.
Okay. So you can tell that the external reviewers letters were due to the departments right around that last week of August. On August 21st, the file closes to you at 4:30 in the afternoon. So this is a Friday, and you can see there's some consistency in Fridays and Mondays. So it closes to you on Friday the 21st, and it opens up to your department chairs so they can upload the external letters. Then it closes to them. They don't get a lot of time to do that. They get a week. Then it opens up for the committee members to review. They get basically a month. Closes to the committee members. And once each time this closes, committee members do not have access to it again. Once it closes to the department chair, there's no more access.
But up until the point that it's closed to us, then, I mean, it's just like any other cloud server. We can, like, if we drop something in and the file names aren't adding up or lining up correctly, we can change names and things.
You can change everything up until and this will be roughly the same date. So it'll be the Friday, like that third, almost the end of August, unless something substantively changes, and I don't think it will. Yes, you can still go in and make any edits and changes.
Good, good. So last minute panic spray is going to be awesome. Yeah.
It's like I said, it's a very time consuming process. It's not difficult, it's just time consuming. You can see here that it closes for department chairs on October 12th. It opened up for the college committee members, or closed. It opens up on the 12th for college committee members, closes November 2nd. So they basically get about 2 weeks. Then it opens for the dean to review. She gets about, 3 weeks, roughly 2 weeks. Then it closes to her, and it all gets sent to the provost's office by around December 1st. And that's then, you see, the dean will meet with you and she will give you her impression. Your department chair is supposed to meet with you as well. Sometimes they meet with you with the committee chair, and sometimes they do not. If they're not, or if they don't, you can ask that they do, but you can also just, keep that in mind. If there was ever anything that was unfavorable, it gives you a position to appeal, because they're not following process. And then I think you do have an appeal process that you can follow. Let me see if there's anything else. So here's that sample. I have that there. That's also on our College of Education Faculty Resources webpage. Again, the link to the electronic dossier. And here are some articles that I found that I was looking at. So finding external reviewers, how to find them. I think that's important. What do you do in the event of a nasty external review? And you want to try and minimize that. You also can tell your department chairs who you would feel should not be in a position of being your external reviewer. So if I were aware of somebody that was politically, we had, untenable substantive differences in our field, I would say, I would put in that request, that caveat. Here are the people that I would request, but I would also I request that I not be reviewed by this person. And if the chair wants to talk with you about that, that's fine. You know, there could be other reasons too. There could be personal reasons. Could be that at one point in time you work together, you stop working together because of something, and generally external reviewers aren't people that you work with extensively. There are people that know of your work, but you haven't been working with them in an extensive way. And that might be difficult if you're in a different role. Like if you're in the research role, you may need to include the people that you can include. And then just this whole idea of, you know, what is the professor? You know, how are these external reviewers influencing what's occurring? Because they do. And when they're looking at it, they're going to take into consideration, again, your teaching, if you've been teaching, service, your research, your contracts, grants, research. So grants count as creative activity. They aren't always counted, and they aren't counted with equivalent weight as manuscripts in some departments. And that just depends upon what department you're working in. At the college level, I know when we were revising our college handbook, and they've all been revised relatively recently, we tried to put in something about grants being considered as an equivalent to a manuscript, and it was removed by the committee. They didn't want that. So there's this balance between how much, and even the idea of putting in an approximate amount. We were told we were not able to include an approximate amount, like saying on average you should write this many manuscripts or articles or over this period of time. That wasn't allowed. And the reason is that the university is going to look at this as a composite of your teaching, research, and service. And they're trying to avoid this idea that if you've done so much of one thing, that means everything else isn't considered. I think, you know, if you have questions, you can always ask. I'll send this out to you so that you'll actually be able to access the links, because if it's not probably going to work as a link if we put it up as a video. And my whole approach has been more conversational, actually, more talking like I would talk. If I were sitting in the conference room telling you about, well, this is what you can expect. This is the way I've really approached this. I haven't tried to do it as if I were doing a presentation at some conference. It's, here are things that I would look for, and here's what I'd watch out for. You know, so in part, it's similar, you know, the old idea in kindergarten, you know, do you work well and play well with others when you get that marking system in your grade report card? There's some aspect of this too. So some of the departments consider collegiality more than others. Some probably thought about taking it out, but it's still there. And according to the provost office, it still matters. The provost's expectation is that people that are teaching faculty and researching also have service responsibilities. So they're looking at, is this person a good overall university citizen? And then if you're going for full professor, and then I'll be talking about that within the next week or two, then they're really looking at is, do you have a national reputation in teaching, research, or service? It doesn't have to be all three at our university. And really it takes, not everybody's going to be equal in all three areas. So it takes somebody that is emphasizing each of those areas or some of those areas to make a really balanced, healthy environment and department. And that's what they're going to be looking for. So you will, if you aren't, I don't have the list because we're actually waiting for that from human resources on the list of people that are going up. I think we have the list, but you will get an email from Amy Wilson. If you're on the list, and she's going to say this is open. If you are an associate, and I'm saying this because other people may want to apply, but they're at an associate. So they're not applying for tenure, they're applying for promotion. They have the decision and ability to decide to go forward or not to go forward, and they can go forward at any time. If they're they're thinking that their decision is going to be unfavorable, they can also withdraw their promotion request. Yes.
How do we get on the list?
Sheila Mathis has that list. So are you going, and she's in human resources. So the other part would be, how long have you been in your current role? So if you're an assistant, then you've got this defined period normally of this, you're 6 years basically. If you're going for an associate to full, and I'm going to verify this because I was told at one point by Dr. Rako that you had to be an academic for 10 years. And I don't know if how accurate that is, so I will follow up on that. That's one of the questions I have. So I'll ask Helen Johnson or Provost Neenan about that to make sure. But
I would like to know the answer to that as well, because if you're able and you have the credentials to go up for full before that 10 years, is that something that can happen, I guess?
Yeah, and I will ask, because that deadline date is one that I've heard, but I haven't seen it. So I want to verify that to see if that's actually accurate. But if you're going from associate to full, it's your decision. You basically notify your chair that you're going to go for full. And if you're an assistant, you can go up early. That's always a possibility. It requires some support, and it's not always something that I would recommend doing, but it just depends upon what your dossier looks like and what information you've gathered. Do you have any questions at all, or when you're going through this process? So Christine, I will ask for you if where you are and can you go forward. I'll ask that.
Yeah, I've been encouraged by our associate director for a couple of years, and
then you should go.
Yeah, I keep not knowing how to initiate the process. Like, should I
email Dan and say, Dan, I would like to apply for or go up for promotion to full research professor. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's all you have to do to start the process. You
Okay.
let him know.
Okay.
And he can tell you and verify, because it'll be vetted at different levels, but you should let him know if you'd want to. And that's how I'd approach that.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be a lengthy letter. It's an email today.
Great.
And if you have any questions, always feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to answer them. It's kind of there's some mystery to the process, so
yeah,
I'm trying to demystify it.
Yeah, and I know it's a little more mysterious when the materials are written, predominantly the people that are applying are in a teaching role. So
yeah,
I appreciate your information.
Well, thank you. Take care of yourself. And I will send this PowerPoint out to everybody that was here today, and everybody else, they can contact me, or it'll be posted on College of Education Faculty Resources webpage. Take care of yourself.